My name's Dolores Crowell, and I have the honor of serving as the Special Projects Manager for DeKalb County CEO Michael Thurman, and I also support everyone in DeKalb, actually, the Board of Commissioners as well. We want to welcome you to our fifth SPLOST II overview, and what we're going to do tonight is a couple of things. We're going to review quickly some of the successes of SPLOST I, and then we'll go into some of the processes and procedures for SPLOST II. But before we get started, we need to recognize our mayor. Madam Mayor, would you like to come up and speak? Our Mayor of Dunwoody, Mayor Getz. Give her a hand. Are there Councilman Seconder? Are there any other elected officials here? Yes. Thank you, Representative. Okay, so we got a couple of housekeeping notes, and maybe I'll do this in reverse, especially since it's our last one. We have our DCTV folks. Would you raise your hands and give them some love? They have been really good at all 5 of these SPLOST meetings. We have Ms. Kathy Warren sitting in the back. She is also a member of the SPLOST team from the collaborative firm, and Mr. Ernest Slaughter, and he's one of our project program managers for SPLOST. So, oh, where's our oversight group? Please stand. Charles, I didn't meet you. Charles McDowell. And what district do you represent? Okay, thank you. Tonight, I just got a couple of housekeeping notes, and then we'll get into the program. The podium is so tall that I'm kind of, you have to, that it's a bit of a struggle, but I'm going to do it. You have 3 ways to submit questions tonight. For those of you in here, we have cards to write down your questions. They'll be collected, they're colorful. They'll be collected throughout tonight's meeting and addressed during the Q&A session. If you're watching us live on YouTube, you can submit your question by way of the YouTube chat box. If not, you can also click on the name of the meeting to open the chat box, and we'll get to many of those as we can. If we receive more questions than we have time for tonight, you can also email inquiries regarding SPLOST to the email address splost@DeKalbCountyGA.gov, and you'll see these links at the end of the presentation tonight. Or call and ask your question by way of voicemail. We do have a voicemail that we monitor every day, really, and just to keep up with folks who have questions that are not addressed in these sessions. And then finally, you'll have much more information about the DeKalb County SPLOST initiative at www.DeKalbSPLOST.com. So, without any further ado, I'll go to the first slide here. And we'll come up, we're at our SPLOST vision statement. This is a statement that was adopted in 2017, right after the legislation was passed. At that time, and still today, one of my jobs was I was the lobbyist for the county, and so I'm very familiar with SPLOST from the very beginning to where we are now. Worked hard with a team of external lobbyists as well as myself, and prior to that I had lobbied for AT&T for about 27 years. And DeKalb County was the only county in the state of Georgia, in a metro county, that did not have a SPLOST. So a lot of work was put into it, and the CEO decided we needed to have some vision sessions and allow the Board of Commissioners and constituents to come to Maloof, where we met, and we had 6 or 7 of these vision sessions. And that gave everybody an opportunity to voice what they would like to see in a SPLOST, also people who had worked on previous versions of SPLOST that had not successfully passed. And we came up with this vision statement. DeKalb County Special Purpose Local Option Sales Tax will support countywide capital outlay improvements that promote a high quality of life for all of its residents. So we can go now to the video, and it's just a quick one that's going to show you what we've done so far with SPLOST.
Hello, I'm DeKalb County CEO Michael Thurman. Citizens of DeKalb County voted in 2017 to fund the county's first ever SPLOST, a special purpose local option sales tax. The program is expected to generate more than $388 million through a 1-cent sales tax that is earmarked for capital projects and distributed among 4 categories: transportation, public safety, parks and recreation and community facilities. Let's take a closer look at how these funds are being used to improve our community.
Overall, SPLOST is expected to generate more than $600 million for DeKalb County and its cities. Of the county's share of more than $388 million SPLOST dollars, $244 million are slated to support transportation projects and improve high-priority corridors, including funding for more than $11 million to rebuild the Cedar Grove Bridge over the Norfolk Southern Railroad to help restore this vital artery. A 2.2-mile extension of the Michelle Obama Trail to move closer to connecting with the South River Multi-Use Trail and ultimately the Atlanta Beltline. Resurfacing more than 160 miles of road to date, with nearly another 100 miles under construction and 26 miles in advertisement to reach an overall goal of 300 miles throughout the entire county. Completing missing sidewalk segments throughout the county to improve access to schools, community facilities, and bus stops. SPLOST funding is also supporting traffic and safety improvements in coordination with a major water line replacement, and installing many roundabouts at several intersections to reduce excessive speeding. SPLOST will help fund $87 million for public safety projects, including enhancements benefiting DeKalb's fire rescue and police departments. Some of those projects are the first of 5 new fire stations planned for DeKalb County, incorporating state-of-the-art health and safety features and community rooms. Also, roof replacements and alarm system upgrades throughout many of the 26 active fire stations in DeKalb. 6 new classroom buildings at the DeKalb County Fire Rescue Academy, and more than $9 million for new police cars, rapid response fire vehicles, and fire radio systems. In the capital outlay category, SPLOST has allocated $57 million for both parks and recreation and community facilities. $2.5 million of SPLOST funds, along with a $1.5 million contribution from the Atlanta Braves Foundation, have been used to support renovated baseball fields featuring artificial turf. And more than $2 million to resurface tennis and basketball courts, including 17 courts at the Mason Mill Tennis Center. 20 million SPLOST dollars have been allocated for general repairs at community facilities, including significant upgrades and repairs at the Lew Walker and Warren Street Senior Centers. More than $16 million for DeKalb County Courthouse repairs and improvements. A new roof for the historic Callenwald Fine Arts Center. And starting reconstruction of the N.H. Scott Pool.
SPLOST is making a tangible impact on the lives of DeKalb County residents. Thank you for this opportunity to showcase your pennies at work.
Okay, give yourselves a hand for your pennies. And so the expectation is that in November, for the referendum, that we'll have yet another success story at the end of 5 or 6 years. So let's move on and I'll just bring out a couple of points about SPLOST I, and then we'll move on to SPLOST II. In SPLOST I, if you recall, we had what we call the baby SPLOST, if you would. We had restrictions where you could only spend 85% of your tax revenue for transportation and 15% for parks and capital repairs. And these items here in 1 through 4 kind of give you a little bit more detail. But the main point is that our SPLOST in DeKalb was the only one in the entire state that had these type of restrictions. Everyone else had what we call now a grown-up SPLOST, which, as you'll see in a minute when one of our attorneys, Ms. Osborne, comes up, she'll go through some of the categories with you. But we were very, very limited. And, you know, there were lots of reasons. What we did when we came in the Thurmond administration was try to depoliticize the process, which is why I believe we were able to get the SPLOST passed, even though we had the restrictions on it. And what we've been able to do over the past 6 years is really build a strong program, have very few real hiccups on the way, if you would, and we hope to continue that with the vote in November. What you'll see when we go to SPLOST II, can we go to the next one? Yeah. On Wednesday, May 3rd, 2023, Governor Brian Kemp signed HB 431, which authorizes DeKalb to hold a SPLOST referendum. Our legislative success would not have been possible without the unanimous support of DeKalb's House and Senate delegations. And let me just stop there to say, as a member of the lead team who lobbied for this legislation, this was probably one of the more challenging pieces because we had already proven that we could successfully execute a SPLOST and we had done well. But actually, the chairs had shifted from when we originally passed in 2017, and our delegation wasn't even the same. And so our delegation, and our state representative here can tell you, looks a lot different today than it did in 2017. And so it required us to do a lot of extra proof, if you would, to policymakers that were not in our delegation, yet they held the keys to the kingdom, if you would. They decided whether or not a bill could even get a hearing, if you would. So, you know, you have to work in a bipartisan fashion, and I'm proud to say that our delegation did that, and we did it well. Our delegation also told us, they said, hey, you want us to support this? We need to know that the cities and the BOC supports us. So you challenged us, and they said, you need to get letters of support. So we went back, we met with the mayors at the DeKalb Municipal Association, and they wrote letters of support. And I can tell you that Chairwoman Carla Drenner, who was the main sponsor and carrier of the bill, as well as Chairwoman Kim Jackson, were heroes in getting us to where we needed to be, at least to get where we needed to be to get to SPLOST II. So just shout out to our delegation. And then this other bullet just talks about the bipartisan support. And look at the numbers, 174 to 0. You know, you don't get that a lot. And I've been down there for many years, more than I care to tell you. And it's rare that you get that kind of bipartisan support. And then the last bullet actually talks about me and my team in government affairs. And we did do a great job, and thanks for our efforts and results. Okay, so now let's bring up Suzanne Osborne. She's one of our esteemed DeKalb County attorneys, and she's going to give us an overview of the SPLOST II categories.
Thank you, everyone. Oh, thank you. Good evening, everyone. So, as mentioned before, our SPLOST I had very limited categories, and now with SPLOST II, we're eligible to utilize all of the 14 categories in the bill, which I'll go over. So there's roads, streets, bridges, sidewalks, and bike paths, public safety and airport facilities and related capital equipment, qualified repairs of existing capital outlay projects. And here, we have an asterisk here because that qualified means that we would have to look at each particular project to make sure that it meets the requirements in the statute. So that would be approved on a case-by-case basis. And then we have cultural, recreational, and historic facilities, courthouse, administrative building, civic center, correctional or detention facilities, library, coliseum, solid waste and recovered material processing facilities. There's stormwater, capital projects by county authority operated in conjunction with one or more cities, water and sewer projects, retirement of our general obligation debt, voting capital equipment, transportation facilities for people or goods, including railroads and mass transit, qualified hospital or hospital facility, and there again, it's qualified, so those would have to be assessed on a case-by-case basis. Any capital outlay project owned or operated or administered by the state within the county, and then broad general authorization for cities and counties to fund outlay projects. And the categories talk a lot about capital outlay projects, so I thought I would read you the definition of that. So a capital outlay project means major permanent or long-lived improvements or betterments, such as land and structures, such as would be properly chargeable to a capital asset account, and as distinguished from current expenditures or ordinary maintenance expenses. So it's a little technical, but those are your categories for SPLOST II.
Thanks, Suzanne. Ms. Warren, can we distribute our handouts? Because we have, of course, we're going to be looking at math, so we got a couple eye charts up here for you. And I just want to expand a little bit on what Suzanne talked about. These categories are all being assessed now. We're taking feedback from different places. One are the 5 forums that we've had here, and we anticipate that people will be circling back with their commissioners and sharing what their concerns are, what they'd like to see in this broad group of categories. And then we have our own professional staff. Each of those departments are making a list of things that we need, not that we necessarily want. And just to be clear, and Chris, he'll tell you that when he comes up, we operated, especially on road resurfacing, on doing the worst first, and we still haven't done all of those roads yet. So we still have a long way to go. We know this is a much broader list than we've ever had, and that's why we're taking the due diligence. All of our attorneys are looking at what categories can fit in which areas. So now that we have, everybody's got a copy, we'll bring up our budget director, Mr. T.J. Siegler. It's the money man.
All right, thank you, Dolores. So I'm here tonight to talk a little bit about EHOS, which is our Equalized Homestead Option Sales Tax. I know that's a mouthful, but that was the second part of the referendum in 2017, along with the SPLOST, was a question of whether we would impose EHOS versus HOST, which was the former sales tax that was used for property tax relief for homeowners as well as capital projects. So unlike host, though, eHost is 100% used for property tax relief for homestead property owners. So the way that works is the proceeds from the tax come to the county. Well, they're collected by the state, and then they are distributed to the county, and then we use that revenue to then provide a credit on your property tax bills if you have a homestead exemption. And so that passed with 71% of the vote back in 2017. All right. And to qualify for host, again, what you need is to have a homestead exemption on your home. So to qualify for a homestead exemption, you have to own the home, and it has to be your primary residence. Okay. So when you get your tax bill, and I think we have an example of this later in the slide deck, there will be a column at the end that says eHost credit, and that shows you how much you're saving from the eHost. So from 2018 through 2022, a total of $591 million in property tax relief has been provided through the eHost credits. I'll add, too, that we just this week passed our millage rates for 2023, and that number is going to go up by $147 million. So total, we're over $700 million in tax relief since the start of eHost in 2018. So the bill that allows us to go forward with SPLOST II, HB 431, did not change any of the provisions of the eHost law, so that will continue the way it is, no matter what. So the two links that you see here, the first one is to the county's website, where you can find additional information about eHost, and then the second one is for the tax commissioner's website, where you can find all the information about homestead exemptions and how to qualify and how to apply. All right, so this table here is just showing how much a typical home by value throughout the county would save in property taxes due to eHost. And had a question from someone last night at the meeting. He actually had his property assessment notice and was saying, well, why isn't my number as high as what you have on this table? And the reason being is this is based on the basic homestead exemption and no other exemptions. So we have another exemption for called the frozen exemption. And so he was already saving a lot of money on his property tax bill through that. So that's why his credit was not as large as what you'd see here. But again, if you have a house that's worth $250,000, that's the fair market value of it, and you just have the basic homestead exemption, eHost would save you about $850 on your property tax bill last year. I think it's going to be slightly higher than that this year. $500,000, you're looking at about $1,800 in savings. $750,000, you're about $2,700. And then at $1 million, the savings is close to $3,700. All right, so this is the property tax bill as promised. So let me see if I can get this to work. So this column right here is the eHost credit. So the way that this works, and I'll point out a few other things while we have this up. So first thing is when you're looking at your property tax bill, if you look up in this top right-hand corner, you're going to see the total appraisal, so that's the fair market value, and then the 40% assessment, which is the actually what you're taxed on. You aren't taxed on 100% of the value. And then these exemption codes, so the H1F. H1 is for the basic homestead exemption, and then the F is for that frozen exemption. And when you see this base assessment freeze, that's the amount that the assessment was when that when that freeze was applied. And then this is the amount of that exemption. So just as I mentioned last night, the gentleman who was looking at his tax bill and wondering why his eHost credit wasn't more, it was because he had a frozen exemption on his home. So then when you come down here, you can see all the various different millage rates that you pay on your property taxes. So that would include everything from the county, which depending on where you live, if you're in a city, you would not pay all of these different millage rates. And then there's going to be a school line, and then you might have some other fees down here as well. But for the eHost, it applies to these first two millage rates, the county operations and the hospitals, because those are the two that are levied throughout the county no matter where you live. So unincorporated, incorporated, everyone pays those two millage rates. And so the way your tax bill breaks it out is you have your taxable assessment times the millage rate, which gives you your gross tax amount. And then it takes out your frozen exemption here and your constitutional homestead exemption. And then finally, the EHOS is applied at the end of that. So in the EHOS, the way that we calculate that is based on a percentage. So for the last 3 years running now, that percentage has been 100%. So whatever tax liability you have left for those two millage rates is completely wiped out by the EHOS. So again, if we went back to the last chart, I think you'll see that this number, the total down here is 810, which is a little bit less than what you would expect on a house with that value. But again, that's due to the gross tax, or excuse me, the frozen exemption amount here. All right. So I think that's about all I got here. So thank you.
Thanks, TJ. I do have some cards. If anybody has questions, you can write them down, and we'll keep moving. So now we're going to talk about our program management. And one of the things we learned early on when we were, once the bill had passed, is that we did not have any experience in executing a SPLOST. We were, like I said earlier, the last county, and if you think about counties like Gwinnett, where they've probably raised about $2 billion by this point in SPLOST relief, if you would, over the years. They've had a SPLOST program since the very beginning, and DeKalb County and others, so we're only on our very first SPLOST. So we went to visit a couple of the chairmen and the commissioners in a couple of large counties, and they shared with us that they had adopted a program management style, because what you don't want to do is take away from your existing staff who were working on roads and bridges, because all this work was being done before. It's just that in DeKalb, we never really had any revenue to do the type of work, and the whole concept of deferred maintenance was at an all-time high, just put it that way. So now we bring in the teams, we bring in Moreland Altobelli, which is now Atlas, and they came in with the entire team that had decades of experience doing program management for us, and they've been very successful. Chris and I actually still talk to each other after 6 years. So we're doing great. But he's got a great team in Ernest, and we'd like him to come up and just talk to us about the program management.
Thanks, Dolores. I get to use the clicker tonight. The first 4 meetings, I didn't get to touch the clicker. So there's a lot of fine print on that, and you've got the handout, and I won't go over it in detail, but you keep hearing the phrase teams. Dolores talks about we're part of the county team. The county staff and Kathy and Ernest from our team are back there. So, as she said, we come on board to help cities and counties manage bond and sales tax programs. And our firm is Atlas. Years ago, you might have heard the names Tom Moreland and Dan Altobelli, Moreland Altobelli. When the firm started in the mid-'80s, SPLOST legislation had been passed by the state. And we started in Liberty County, was one of the first counties in Georgia to pass a SPLOST program. And we work for almost all the metro counties, Cobb, Gwinnett, Rockdale, Douglas, and another baker's dozen of counties around the state. And we're staff augmentation. We come on board, like Dolores said, to do the day-to-day work, to handle all this extra money. You keep hearing millions and millions. It's billions of pennies, right? $388 million is 388 billion pennies. So, in some quick numbers, what Teams does, Total Enterprise Asset Management System, it's a behind-the-scenes software system that works with the county's finances and the state Department of Revenue. And every month we crank out one of these reports. It's 150 plus or minus pages, 150, 140 active projects, and so forth. And it's sort of like the old journalism story: who, what, why, where, when. Anybody, the county commissioner, staff, what's going on with this project, Ernest or I and the county commissioners, staff all have access to the database directly, and they can pull it up and see where we're at, where we should be, where we maybe haven't gotten there yet, what the corrective actions are. So it's just a tool to keep track of the money, because the state requires SPLOST dollars are pay-as-you-go, and they can never be mingled with anything else. So Dan McNabb, the finance director for the county, the pennies roll in from the state, they go to a separate bank account, sort of like quarantine, walled off, and then money never goes away. If for whatever reason things happen, projects are defined, utilities, right-of-way, there's always something that's going to cause us to go a little slower than we would have liked to go. When the last penny's collected next March, the money that's in the bank is always available to finish out SPLOST 1. And if we're successful and the voters are kind enough to give the county another 6 years of SPLOST this fall, SPLOST II projects get paid for with SPLOST $2. How much money have we collected to date? I don't think we put that in any of the slides, but $350 million is what the state has sent DeKalb County unincorporated through the end of May. There's always a 1 month delay, so we won't know till the end of July what the June revenue was. TJ's folks back in 2016, 2017, when the referendum was being put together, thought the county would get $388 million. So here we are, we're into our last year of collections, and we've got 90% of the revenue. We'll be somewhere north of $400 million with the current SPLOST. The pandemic was a double-edged sword. Sales tax revenues have gone up higher than we expected. Interest rates have really skyrocketed this year, which is good news because the money goes into the bank and the bank pays us interest. Bad news is costs have also gone up. But we've been pretty lucky. Early on in the program, costs were low. We're on track to get at least 275 of that 300 miles paid. They're under contract. There's one more contract out. Actually, bids are open tomorrow. And I think between the interest earned, and we get a little money every year from the state to pave roads, we'll probably get that last contract awarded and finish out the 300 miles. For comparison, pre-SPLOST, Peggy Allen, Roads and Drainage Division, she had about a $5 million a year budget to resurface roads. And she got $4 million of that from the state of Georgia as part of an LMIG program to get on population. So Board of Commissioners had to cough up the extra $1 million to make a 20% match. SPLOST, we average $25 to $30 million a year on resurfacing. So it's a huge benefit. And that, as Dolores said, that's 40% of the program is resurfacing. The next largest category is public safety. So we bought fire trucks, we built new fire stations, we're buying land for new fire stations, we bought new fire equipment, new police cars. And what SPLOST II, if we pass it, the new legislation, took away the training wheels. The laws we're operating under now for SPLOST 1, 85% of the revenue had to go to transportation and public safety with no strings attached. We can build new buildings, build new bridges, build new roads, build new stuff. Poor library lady, Allison. Libraries, the courthouse, any non-public safety, non-transportation structure, we can only repair. The law was specific, no new buildings, in so many words. So we've been able to do a little bit of renovations at the libraries. Hopefully August, Allison, all the paperwork will get signed off on, and we've got about $1 million left to renovate restrooms at the older library buildings. And we put new roofs on the courthouse, and we're getting ready to redo the parking deck in downtown Decatur. It's past its lifespan, so we've got some capital repairs to get another 10 or more years out of that. This slide is the fun slide of what y'all see when you go to the county's website. You click on the penny, and it takes you to the site with a map, and then that little map is transportation comes up first because it's kind of fun. Red and green, looks like Christmas. Type your address in, you'll see projects near you. That shows in green every road that we've resurfaced, in red every road that's in a contract that's been let. There's 4 active contracts right now. And if it's an orange color, it's actually being worked on actively, and you would have gotten a little flyer if you live in an unincorporated county. And it said, please don't park on the street because we can't pay if your car's parked in front of your house. And also it's got tabs for public safety and other projects. And you can see, parks and libraries, parks especially, where we put new shelters, new pavilions, new athletic fields. So, and I guess the last thing I'd leave you with is the giant report we send out. The county has a robust small business enterprise goal, and the goal for the program is 20%. They want 20% of every 20 cents of every dollar to go to local small businesses throughout the county. Right now, we're north of 30, 35% local participation. And one of the fun things is some of the paving contractors that 5 or 6 years ago were small women-owned businesses who were subcontractors to the big boys, the C.W. Matthews and the Snells, have grown to the point they're now prime contractors and are able to bid on contracts on their own. And we're seeing the same thing on a smaller scale with some of the building contractors. So that's SPLOST I. And we're here for questions for the rest of the evening. Too late till I get thrown out, right?
Okay. Somebody else had, yeah. And I guess I would be remiss if I didn't recognize a former DeKalb County employee who actually worked with us when we were looking at doing SPLOST, Mr. Jay Vanicki. No, he was our budget director, and a good one he was. Actually, he was very patient with me because I had just come to the county, and he gave me a lot of insight into the whole world of budgeting, which is why I'm still a lobbyist. But we got any questions? Did we get any from YouTube? Not yet? Okay, well, I'll just read these we have. Can you please clarify the exact next steps after this meeting to identify and qualify projects? What are the opportunities for public to stay informed? Sure. So what's happening now is that list of all those categories that you saw on the sheet is actually built into the legislation. So you'll see some variation of that in your sheets. And so what our legal department is doing is they're taking that list and they're comparing it to what we've asked our department heads to do, which is create, you tell people, tell us what you need, not what you want. So we have to decipher between those two. But we're taking the list that we get from each department. Watershed has one, Parks has one, public safety, which includes animal shelters, libraries. All these different groups are submitting their request in to our COO, Zach Williams, and he's taking all that down. Then we meet with Chris and his team, the department heads, and we compare what the requests are to what the needs are, and if those roads if we haven't been able to address those in SPLOST I, and it's still rated the worst it could possibly be, those roads I'm assuming would get priority. And the same thing for roofs and other things. The reality is that this time we have a lot more opportunity to do capital outlay, but even that needs to be focused in on what we need, more. And I'm sure with your different constituencies, if I was working at the animal shelter, I would say we need larger facilities, we need more space. And the second part of your question was how you give input. Well, this is one place, and then you can use either of these. But what I also recommend is that people just contact their commissioners, put it in writing, because the Board of Commissioners ultimately will approve the categories that are chosen. So that's how you do it. What is the actual text that will be on the ballot? Good question, because it's not done yet. Our legal department is working on ballot language. I remember when we did the first one, there were 3 questions, I believe. But you had to vote for both eHost and SPLOST. If SPLOST failed, and that there is no indication that we would change that. So the expectation is you need to vote yes twice for both of those. But again, don't hold me to that because, and our Suzanne can tell you that they're still working on all the language for the ballots. That usually comes out after you know, we've got a lot of other meetings that happen. There's a meetings with the city managers where we come in, we meet with the city managers. They come up with an intergovernmental agreement. And then once everybody blesses the IGA intergovernmental agreement, you know, they move on to the next step. Then the other thing that we were pretty successful at in communications was we met with all the cities, all of your communication managers. And we had like joint sessions, and we talked about, well, how are you going to communicate your SPLOST? Because, you know, really once the unincorporated part of the county gets their share and the cities all get their shares, the cities decide what their projects are. The cities come up with their own list as long as they remain in those categories. 5, 6 years ago, it was easy because you only had transportation and capital outlay. This time, you got a lot more to choose from. For cities that also have local elections, oh, thank you. For cities that also have local elections, where will this question be on the ballot? Which order? Yeah, don't know yet, but it's coming. And what we have done is, like, if you went on the website now, you'd see the 2017 ballot. We'll be doing the same thing there, putting FAQs up. And there's a whole education campaign that has to happen. During SPLOST, the county is not allowed legally to advocate for anything. Our whole role is what we're doing here tonight, just educating. There's a whole different segment of the process where they'll go out and advocate and put out signs and do all the fun stuff. Okay, will the list of projects be published on your website and reported to local papers? Yes, it will. How do you partner with cities to supplement or share funding? There are a few times when we have IGAs where you may have a multi-jurisdictional project. I know we had one that was like Panola Road. Didn't we do something there? We've had a few of those, but it still requires an IGA, and the two parties get together and decide, you know, it's one street and it could be one county, a county on one side and city-owned on the other, but yet, you know, the sidewalk's busted and you need it fixed. So, and they do this with other projects as well, water and sewer, so that would be kind of like business as usual, but it would be in the form of an IGA. How do you partner with cities to supplement or share funding? Yeah, that's all worked out in the IGAs. They decide which part each party owns, and then they come to an agreement and say, okay, this sidewalk costs $100, we'll pay 50, you pay 50. That's kind of how it works. Okay. Does the DeKalb County SPLOST website show, along with the open project, the funds allocated for each? I've not been to the site, and I can't really see on the screenshot in the handout. Are there numbers on there?
Posted, yeah.
Okay.
Projects put up, the budgets are posted.
Okay, for each of the projects?
Yeah.
Okay. So yes, the budgets are. And then we still have how many more miles to go in the county?
We're going to get close to 300.
Yeah.
If we didn't spend another dime, for whatever reason, we'd be at 275.
Okay. Well, I've done all of our questions. We have any more? Because otherwise we're tapped out. Yes, ma'am.
So who actually makes that final list? Who actually makes that final list that gets presented to the county commissioners to vote on? I mean, how does that list get narrowed down?
It's narrowed down between I'll call them the subject matter expert, the people on staff who do the everyday jobs that would include all those categories. Each department is submitting a list saying this is what we need, and then we're comparing that and looking at that. Well, we're doing an assessment with what our program management says, okay? And then we get feedback that we get from our constituents. I have a whole list of these cards where people have asked questions, and we've got answers to those, and they've made recommendations. And then all of that is assessed. It's kind of like making the sausage making part. Once you do that, you're going to come out with a number. I think right now, the list of the request was, Chris, help me out. Was, yeah, we've got already like $1 billion worth of requests from all the different departments. And it just has to be narrowed down to what makes sense. It's with a limited amount of money. Oh, her question was, how do you determine what makes the list? Yes, ma'am.
So obviously, you know, we're here about the animals in the shelter.
Okay.
Would our request then go to the Public Safety Committee via the questions we've submitted? Or is there another avenue? And how would you know what to estimate would be needed?
Okay, it's all of those questions as far as, I'll take the estimation first. Because we already have a team, an in-house staff team that already has made assessments on all of our facilities, they kind of already know what those numbers are. And then what will happen is they'll go to, let's say you need extra or a new roof on the shelter. So they have a group of vendors that they already have pricing on from other projects. So they already know really what the industry, what the market demand is for any of these projects. And that all goes into kind of like a spreadsheet, if you will. It's a huge spreadsheet. And tell me the first part of your question.
Well, so okay. So through our questions, you know that we're asking for more space in the shelter, not a new roof. Our roof's holding up fine. And so do they know how much space we're asking for? Do they need a feasibility study? Do they?
Oh, yeah.
How do we help this process?
Right, and all of this, in the assessments, they've already done a lot of that work. They've already, because obviously 2023 is not the first time that we've heard that we need to improve the shelter or the libraries. So we've got all of that data already. Just like if there are potholes somewhere that were huge and they were just there 6 months ago, same ones are going to be there. So a lot of the data is already captured, if that's answering your question.
It is.
Okay.
Is there a way for us to see what they believe the need is and, you know, what they believe the cost would be?
Yeah, I think for this, since this is our first time with a variety or a long list of projects, I can't answer what that format would look like. However, my recommendation would be to any group or any individual that is passionate or just serious about seeing something improved, a service improved or something fixed, is to write it to your commissioner. That way you have kind of like a paper trail, if you would, and you can say, these are the things that we asked for.
Okay, so since this is a county facility, although it's in Commissioner Patrick, who I think did not come tonight, it's in his district, this district. Is he the one we write to, or do all the commissioners have to hear about this? I'm not clear.
No, I mean, well, okay, let's be real. Nobody doubts for 1 minute that there's not a concern about animals in DeKalb County. So we know that. And so one of the things the CEO said last night, which was interesting, was that the whole piece with public safety and with the libraries, because we had a lot of questions about libraries too. And you know, the CEO is a writer and an author, so he has an affinity for writing and the whole concept of storytelling and writing. So he emphasized that there will be concern and attention paid to the repair and upgrading of libraries. I mean, it's just a natural occurrence. We already have some of that on the books. And we would anticipate the same kinds of things would happen for animal shelter. Our public safety piece, our public safety director is probably the best suited to say how they'll execute and when. But
And is there one commissioner that has to
No, not one commissioner, because, remember, they have to have,
Have to make it as a group?
yes,
Okay.
it has to be, you need 4 votes to do anything in DeKalb. So you have to have 4 commissioners, and everything that we've done with SPLOST, we also have what we call a SPLOST Committee of the Whole. That's another good group. You should go to those meetings. Okay, right. That's where you really can get into the weeds about, and I'm sure Chris will love that you're coming, because he gives a presentation, and you can ask him right then what's going on with this line item and when do you expect this project. That's where you really get that. And your oversight group members, you know, from your district, your oversight group person is here, and part of their charge is to come back to their constituents and say, this is what's going on with SPLOST.
We're already looking at, with Jack Lumpkin's folks, Public Safety Director, some of the budget in peer counties.
Right.
And DeKalb and Douglas and Clayton and other places have done, trying to have apples and compare population and needs and budgets and see.
Yeah. So to answer your question, there's not one commissioner that would decide that. They all are going to vote on these categories. Let me get this lady right here first.
I may have missed this, but when we go to vote, will we know the specific list of projects that's been approved with any kind of details surrounding it so we know what we're voting for?
Yeah, there'll be details. I'm trying to remember, on our original SPLOST in 2017, there were details there too. But yeah, you'll have that, because part of our education campaign will include, you know, ballot education, you know. It'll be on the web and you'll be able to see it. And our attorney is right here, Suzanne.
I don't know that we can say there'll be a specific project saying, you know, at 285 we'll resurface this or whatever.
Oh, yeah,
But
you're
there'll
right.
be narrowed categories of, we'll do up to 2 fire stations or things like that.
It won't detail the exact facilities.
No,
No.
Well, I can't say for sure at this point, but last time that's how it worked.
Yeah, I don't think the law requires that you have, you know, this intersection here or there, but there is some level of specificity, so you know that there'll be a certain number of, there'll be roads repaired, and you got.
I was just going to add, so one thing that you have to be careful of, if you put on the ballot, the referendum question, a specific project, you have to build that specific project. And the problem becomes, and we've been doing this for 4 decades, there could be a project that everyone thought was the best thing since Wonder Bread and the invention of the wheel, and the voters say, yeah, we want SPLOST, we want, among other things, that project. And I pick on Douglas County, not because they had a SPLOST ballot that had transportation and public safety, and they desperately thought they needed a new courthouse. They didn't really think through exactly what that courthouse would cost. So transportation was a bucket, the categories, and the expectation was staff, subject matter experts, would decide what roads would have to be paved when. But because the courthouse was there, they had to build a courthouse. So they lost a cycle of transportation funding from that SPLOST till they could get back to the voters. So generally what will happen, this is our experience, we came in after the SPLOST had passed in 2017, obviously. The staff and the Board of Commissioners will be reviewing specific projects in each of the departments that start to form the basis of what the budget needs are for those categories. So there was a broad outline of the target for transportation was 300 miles of road resurfacing and probably these 20 or 30 intersections, but not in any specific order, and we'll try to do them as we can, as we figure out exactly, because you don't really have a lot of time to do all the upfront research on right-of-way and utilities, but you've got an idea, this is our target. And the same thing for the public safety buildings. The chief, I think, thought back in 2017, he could have gotten maybe dollars back then, 12 new stations. Well, as time's gone on and costs and everything's happened, we're going to get at least 5 brand new ones out of the current SPLOST. He's got 9 stations that were built prior to 1960. Can we get all those replaced in SPLOST 2? Probably not. But So there'll be a big line item for categories. And then you just have to, you'll understand prior to the vote what types of projects form those categories.
Right, thank you, that's good.
Right.
Perfect. I think, yes.
Just to clarify, on the advocates for the cat animals, if we want to reconcile what the county feels is the need with what we feel is the need, we would go to the public safety director. Is that correct? Just to clarify.
No, I mean, I think you stay with your commissioners, and the commissioner, you know, they advocate on your behalf.
Okay.
Yeah. And there was somebody, gentleman back here.
So with the difference on the ballot this time, so you're not going to be locked into any categories. There's not going to be like percentages like there was before, like when you had, it was 75%, whatever.
It was
for
85-15, yeah.
So you're going to have total flexibility. So you can say that you're going to spend money in these categories, but then you can move it from transportation over to parks or to public, whatever, right? So
Probably, once you lock in the categories, transportation category, public safety category, parks
Right.
category.
are you assigning dollars to that or percentages or what?
Well, it's a percentage of expected revenue, so that's where the dollars come in.
So it'll say on there it's going to be 50% transportation, and you're bound by that. You can't reallocate money from that to another bucket later.
Well, just in terms of ballot language, I would just recommend that since we're a ways from that, I don't want us to give out, and Madam Counselor, if you would chime in, I don't know that we want to give out too much detail on what's going to be on the ballot, just in terms of, because they haven't drafted the language yet.
Yes, what she said.
Oh.
We're still, well, we're still really waiting, one, to find out, you know, what the needs are.
Right.
That's out of legal's hands. We don't do that, but then once that happens, we take that information and form the categories that will be listed on the ballot.
This is about this movement.
Yes.
This is how many months from now? 4 months.
It's a work in progress. We'll be
Oh, yeah.
ready.
And just so you know, we didn't just start,
You're not going to have time to digest it and think about it, right?
No,
Oh, yeah.
We are required to have it ready way in
Right.
advance of the vote, so you will have it before the vote.
oh yeah, it's not like you'll get it on November 6th or even October 6th. You'll probably have it before then, but
Yes,
I guess,
so there are statutory requirements
right.
of dates when we are required to submit that information to the Board of Elections.
It has to
and
be newspaper.
It has to be noticed in the newspaper for at least 4 notices weeks before the election. So, you know, it'll be coming out definitely before early voting starts. We do, and we're still trying to reconcile that with some requirements that the Secretary of State has. So we're working on that as well.
I'll ask my state representative, is there anything you wanted to, she was
You've done an
very,
excellent job explaining.
oh, well, thank you, thank you. And you did an excellent job for us. Just want to express my appreciation because it was your first,
Yeah, this is my first.
right, it was her first session, so I'm probably like an old head there.
Just teasing me back there.
All right, well, if there aren't any more questions, I hope everybody drives home safely. We're going to post our questions and just keep monitoring the website, and we'll have updates for you. Thank you for coming.